7:30 recently exposed widespread doping in the greyhound racing industry, and since then we've had a huge response. We've received thousands of emails, calls and Facebook posts, some from insiders who've raised more concerns about the industry, others who claim we didn't show the positive aspects of their sport. We also had a strong response from an unexpected quarter, veterinary nurses. They're the ones who have to help kill the healthy dogs the industry discards every year. Tonight, the vet nurses reveal another of the industry's secrets. Before greyhounds are killed, many of them have one dying duty. They're drained of their blood to help sick and injured dogs at animal hospitals. Sean Rubenstein-Dunlop has this report, produced by Leslie Robinson.
And racing, good level starting.
It's a disturbing reality of the greyhound industry, and one that's rarely discussed.
You get 8 dogs dropped off, oftentimes they will be just absolutely bled to death and euthanised, put in a body bag and put in the freezer and taken away for incineration. That's absolutely routine. No one would bat an eyelid at that being the reality.
Tonight, vet nurses reveal what happens to the dogs the greyhound industry doesn't want.
They would be brought in by a trainer. Normally we would get about 3 or 4 dogs and then they would arrive and then they'd be bled within about 48 hours of arriving. So they'd be put under anaesthetic and then bled and then euthanised while under anaesthetic.
This multi-billion-dollar sport relies on massive overbreeding. Each year, thousands of dogs never make it to the track because they fail to chase or simply aren't fast enough. They're what the industry calls wastage. Vet nurse Victoria Luxton-Bain worked at a vet clinic near Melbourne's Sandown track. She saw both ends of the greyhound life cycle, helping with artificial inseminations and euthanizing perfectly healthy dogs.
I still remember the first time I had to do it and I couldn't stop crying. I think my worst day was we had 7 brought in by one person and you just had to do 7, one after the other. So I mean, when you're euthanizing these dogs, they're not old dogs, they're completely healthy. You know, most of them are still standing there wagging their tails and licking your face while you're actually euthanizing them.
She quit in protest and moved to an animal emergency centre, but her new job was even more confronting. Almost weekly, she was required to help drain greyhounds of their blood before they were put down.
Good boy. The blood was used for any dogs that needed a blood transfusion. And it would be separated into red blood cells bags and also plasma.
The fact is that vets need blood to help injured and sick dogs that are brought in for treatment, and unwanted greyhounds provide a ready supply.
A large percentage of greyhounds have a blood type that's referred to as universal, so most dogs are able to receive that without having a transfusion reaction. Also, they're extremely placid. They have really large veins, they have a high red blood cell count, and there's a lot of them who are no longer required for racing.
It does happen quite often. We don't talk about it as often as we should, to be honest. It is heartbreaking to see.
A non-recovery donation would have an intravenous catheter placed. The animal would be anaesthetised and have a tube placed down its throat, so it would be unconscious essentially. Then the femoral artery would be located. A large needle would be inserted into that. If they're struggling to get that blood out, they will give the animal adrenaline, which just gives that animal a last gasp if it's starting to essentially die.
For this Queensland vet nurse, draining a greyhound of up to 2 litres of blood was a task too hard to bear.
I think it's the equivalent to essentially organ theft or rounding up the most vulnerable members of a community and exploiting them just because you can. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So most nurses are appalled by it and technicians are appalled by it. A lot of vets are appalled by it, but it is considered a solution to the requirement for blood products, and I don't think there would be a vet nurse out there who isn't aware of it, and I don't think there would be a vet nurse or vet technician out there who's worked in a larger referral hospital or a larger veterinary clinic who hasn't had something to do with it. It's that standard.
7:30 has heard from a number of nurses too afraid for their jobs to speak out publicly about the practice of bleeding dogs. One from New South Wales wrote of her horror.
On countless occasions I found myself out the back, literally sobbing over the dogs I was unable to save. Often they drained the dog until the blood pressure was that low it would barely flow. Then they'd just inject them with lethabarb and chuck them in a body bag like garbage.
There's a huge greyhound industry with thousands of greyhounds, and so where we're at is in an ICU like this, we have lots of critical patients, lots of patients that need blood transfusions.
VSS is a busy animal hospital in Brisbane where greyhounds are bled and then euthanised.
These dogs are brought into the hospital but by trainers. We have ethics approval from the Queensland Government. On average, we'll do somewhere between 50 and 100 a year, so it's 1 or 2 a week.
This greyhound is one of the lucky few for which a home has been found.
Oh yeah, don't stop, I know.
But many more will be drained of their blood before they're put down.
The charge for a bag of blood is $150. If we buy the same thing from the blood bank in Melbourne, by the time it gets here it's $400. We would prefer not to do this. It's not what we as vets like doing. We're about saving animals, but sadly there are lots of greyhounds and other pet dogs that are not wanted. And so it's something we would prefer not to do. We look at this hard and long, and I guess we feel that it's ethical because these are dogs that would be euthanised, and they can help other patients.
They're usually generally really easy, placid dogs that do well just lying down on the table.
This animal hospital in Sydney has set up a humane alternative with the support of Greyhound Racing New South Wales. Adopted greyhounds make small donations, like the human blood donor system.
It's a very in-demand product, and it's very useful that our greyhounds are so good at taking donations from.
So you've got some lined up.
Selena Cottrell-Dormer and Nevin Prakash have started a similar program in Brisbane.
Our last clients donated about 2 weeks ago, I think now.
Okay.
So we've used one unit already.
Used one, yep.
Recently for a trauma victim.
Okay.
So
They hope it's one small step towards ending the exploitation of these dogs.
You're a good girl. What we want to see is an elimination of greyhounds being killed for their blood.
And you can join a discussion of some of the issues raised in that story on our Facebook page now at facebook.com/ABC730.